Hello and welcome back to Track 1. This is session 12, Navigating the Complexities of Open Access, a case study from the University of Copenhagen in collaboration with Chronosub, one of our vendors. We have with us today Martin Jagerhorn, Head of Business Development at Chronosub, as well as Michael, he's down on my screen. I can't see the thing. And Michael's there as well. He's head of section for research support at the Copenhagen University Library. Martin has 20 years experience in business development and investments in tech companies supporting the research domain. And I assume they'll introduce themselves a little bit before they get into their presentation. Michael, as I said, is the head of research support. Services at Copenhagen University Library. It's part of the Royal Danish Library, supporting strategic and research-specific areas of open science, research data management, bibliometrics, copyright, and teaching. So really super busy. And welcome to you both and to the session. Go ahead and take it away.
Thanks a lot for that introduction, Bonnie. And welcome to this session also from our side, where we'll talk about navigating the complexities of open access. And we'll primarily look at that collaboration that we have between the University of Copenhagen and Chronosub. Before we'll get into the details of sort of the case study itself, for you that are not so familiar with Chronosub, it is the name both on the company, also based in Copenhagen actually, and the platform. And the platform is an open access management system that serves to deal with all kinds of open access challenges. Very much it's about managing APCs, so paying for article processing charges in a smoother way, and monitoring and managing open access agreements, also in funder policies and the like. And we work a lot with all types of stakeholders in the research ecosystem, so including a number of funders that you can see here, but a lot with universities and library consortia, and also directly with a number of publishers. But regardless of the perspective, whether we are a funder, a publisher, or university, or actually an author, we share a lot of common challenges, and this is what we'll see is the case also for the University of Copenhagen. So as you know, we have more and more funders, including Coalition S and many others, that have more and more complex policies for where authors can publish. So it becomes increasingly intransparent and complex for the authors to know in what journals they can publish and under what conditions, to not run any compliance risks, but be in compliance with these different funding policies. As you also know, these funding policies or publishing policies from funders also drive the publishers to develop new business models for their sustainability reasons. I think there are about 27 or 28 different open access business models or mechanisms today. And I'm sure you're familiar with many of them, like gold and green and hybrid and read and publish and publish and read, subscribe to open, vouchers and APC discounts and so forth. And this makes it in turn even more difficult in many ways for the universities. And that's what we'll look at now for the University of Copenhagen. Because from a university perspective, well, it becomes very time consuming to go into different publisher dashboards and manually trying to collect data and validate which articles to pay for, which ones to include in an agreement or not. But from our perspective, it's really the worst situation for the authors because they have to do essentially a lot of this work themselves. They run these compliance risks. They have to fill in huge forms when they submit their manuscript to the publishers in the first place. Once they get accepted, well, they have to figure out how they can get funding for that APC if there is one. And they have to report back on the outputs from their grants to the funders and manually put in or at least validate data in repositories or CRIS systems locally. So we have a lot of different systems, but the problem is, as you know, that these systems are not communicating very well with each other. And this means that we have a lot of manual and duplicated work, putting the same data over and over again into different systems. And that makes the data also fragmented and impossible to use for reliable analytics. So it's really time consuming and high cost for all parties. So what we try to achieve is to really facilitate the communication between these different stakeholder groups with really the primary purpose of unburdening the authors, but of course also unburdening university administrators, managers, and the like. And in order to optimize the communication between the stakeholders, well, we integrate with tons of different systems, and we collect a lot of data. And that means that authors can go into in this case, University of Copenhagen branded environment on Chronosub, where they can see about 46,000 journals that are indexed. And based on their funding source, they can directly see flagged for each journal which journals that offer a compliant route into that funder's policy, and also what that route looks like. In addition, we also bring in the university's different publisher agreements, so they can see who will actually pay for this. Will the funder pay? Does the university pay for something, or is it covered by a read and publish agreement? Or is there maybe at least a discount on an APC? So this is sort of the starting point. And then we've integrated Chronosub with a lot of publisher systems, so submission and peer review systems. So for many thousands of these journals, you can also submit the data directly into these systems, which means that we can get the data back in a much more automated manner. So we try to get data directly from publishers for article metadata and invoices. And we also offer authors sort of a very easy path by just forwarding information, and we automatically ingest it from there. And the reason for that is that we want to facilitate for universities to have one single place to go to, where they have access to the data already upon acceptance, and that's quite important. In Pure and other CRIS systems, the purpose is, of course, a little bit the same, to collect the data in an automated way, but that happens upon the article being published already. And for us, it's important that we collect the data upon acceptance, because that's where we can address, for example, compliance issues. That's where we can check and validate that this is really eligible for funding from the funder or the university's own open access fund, for example. And this means, as we collect this data and structure it in this way, we can automate all these kinds of checks for compliance with different policies, and also automate the checks seen to funding eligibility. In addition to that, we work with a deposit account that the university can use to pay for these APCs across all publishers. And as the data is then structured, and we have unique identifiers for all these related entities in terms of journals related to the article to the authors to the institution, and to grants and the funders and so forth, then we can also, in a completely automated way, populate the CRIS systems, or Pure in this case, and also institutional repositories. As we can have these direct one-to-one mappings using unique identifiers, instead of trying to map based on text or strings, and then have to have a manual validation and quality assurance. And you can also use Chronosub for then different kinds of specific open access reporting, and reuse the data in Pure for all kinds of other reporting, hence related into sort of the Pure universe of data. So with that said, to give you a little bit of an introduction and idea of what Chronosub is about, I'll hand over to Michael to take you through a little bit more details about our collaboration.
Thank you very much, Martin. So just to give you a head up start on where how our collaboration took place, it started 1 week before the coronavirus broke out. So that has been in itself pretty challenging to run a collaboration during Corona, but I think we managed, and maybe to some points it became easier because we kept quite virtual from the beginning. And this is a digital platform. So in that sense, I mean, it's also the way we want to reach our researchers at the university. So, but I mean, we started in 2020 with a pilot with the biggest faculty at Copenhagen University, so the science faculty, the Royal Library, and Chronosub. And the aim was to develop a journal finder, so to help researchers, guiding them through the publication process. So actually from the beginning give them the exact information they need before submission and journal selection. And that's an area and field as a library that we haven't worked so much with. So I think it's a very important collaboration we have here. Typically, when we work with open access, we do it post-publication, but often it becomes too late. And sometimes we see that researchers, they don't comply with research funders' policies, for example. So that's one way we want to ensure that we give researchers the exact information they do need, simply by building in various data in the same system, so they don't have to go to different data sources to navigate the open access pathway. So the long-term objectives of this collaboration, that is, I mean, actually our pilot was a prototyping phase because we did develop the journal finder together based on the needs from both researchers, but also, as we have seen in research support from the library. But I mean, the long-term objectives would be to streamline the communication and workflows between all the stakeholders that Martin have just shown. So we want to engage more with funders. They need the same data, and we need the data for monitoring open access. We need the data for our licensing agreements. I mean, so in that sense, have a hub for central sharing of information would be really crucial to in the future. So what we want to offer is a hub for more automated compliance checks. In the future, maybe even more automated APC payments and reporting to funders. We want to also, we have a quite clear goal to reduce the expenditures being spent on gold and hybrid open access publishing at the moment. So in Denmark, we have a green open access strategy. And in that sense, I think that Chronosub can help facilitate that as well. And that's exactly one of the next goals of this collaboration, is to investigate how we might be able to populate our CRIS system, which is based on Pure, on the green strategy we have nationally and at the university. So that would be one area of exploration. Could I have the next slide, Martin? So some of the data points we have integrated into the journal finder falls into 4 areas, we can say. So we do look into other data services. We have pulled in data from the API in Pure CRIS. So we have the bibliographic metadata on existing publications that we have in our CRIS system. We Chronosub have integrated the version 2 of the Sherpa Romeo database, which is very important for publishers' policies around especially green open access. And we did a pilot project a couple of years ago where we monitored APC data at Danish institutions and specifically University of Copenhagen. So we already have some APC data that we would like to have in the system as well. And then in Denmark, when it comes to journalists and indexing, we have this bibliometric research indicators, which is a performance-based bibliometric indicator. And it's the same as Norway has, and that's a journalist that is quite important to researchers based on level 1 and level 2 and even level 3 journals. So that will become important. And then, of course, the well-known and whitelist curated DOAJ database is very important for us as a kind of gold standard to also avoid predatory publishers. And then integration with Scopus and Web of Science for indexing as well is important. And then what becomes really essential in the system is that researchers are able to cross-reference the different funder policies with actually the journal selection in Chronosub. So the University of Copenhagen receives a lot of funding from the European Commission. So that will be both in the previous Horizon 2020 framework and also on ERC, and also, of course, in the upcoming Horizon Europe framework, where there is a mandatory policy on open access publishing. And that also actually relates to research data. And then we have the Danish public sector with research funding, and they are a bit more mild with acceptance of embargoes for social science and humanities, 12 months, and also in the STEM field, 6 months embargo on open access delay. And then, of course, in Denmark, we have a national open access strategy that is important. It has an aim of 100% open access by 2025. So it's actually just around the corner. So a lot of work to be done. And then we have, as also being the Royal Danish Library and the National Licensing Consortium, we have we're still taking part in the Scope 3 deal. We have discount schemes on the ACS, Spring Open, BMC. And then we, by this year, made an Elsevier agreement in their hybrid portfolio with no APC being paid from researchers at corresponding institutions. So these are some of the data we have built in. So if you make a journal selection in Chronosub, you will be presented if there is a deal or not, or whether it complies with different policies. And that has always been the aim. Could I have the next slide? Yes. So originally in the pilot, we built a journal finder, and it still exists behind a login version. So a KU or UCPH instance where researchers from University of Copenhagen can log in and make their selections. But as Martin mentioned, I think at the beginning, I mean, we want to take out this into the public, so even more researchers can make that journal selection without necessarily have to log in. So this platform now is still open, but we have from actually during the Open Access Week, the public journal finder was launched. And this is a system that gives you the ability to filter through different areas, to make your selection based on some of these journal indexing lists, to set the licensing terms, to choose which publisher you prefer, to set embargo periods, and also amounts of APC in the bottom. I think in the bottom you can see that. And then on the landing page of your journal, Chronosub or Journal Finder also checks with which open access pathway is this. Is it compliant with, for example, if you're a part of Plan S, they're integrated with the journal checker tool as well. Is it being indexed in the DOAJ? And so that kind of information will be flagged in the system. And then what I really like about this is that there is a lookup in the Sherpa Romeo database, giving the exact conditions for different versions of a publication, that being the early version, the accepted version, or the publisher version. And that's really, really essential information to give to our researchers. So that works now, and throughout the coming collaboration, we're really looking forward to the user feedback from our research communities to even help improving this and get good feedback. That's definitely the aim. So the next slide. So what we are dealing with now, that we have a foundation, which is the public journal finder, and that was the actual requirement we got from the University of Copenhagen, from the management. Give us a simple tool that is easy for researchers to use, and let's build from that kind of baseline. So the next steps that we are looking into is exactly the repository deposits and the green open access management, because that takes up a lot of administrative staff hours at the university libraries. So how can we work a bit more automated with data collection and even maybe writing directly into the API with metadata and full text? That would be a really, really fantastic solution if we could come to that kind of collaboration. Then on the APC management, as a really decentralized university, it has been a bit more difficult. We're not a top-down university. We have really, really strong faculty, and really get into the economics of publishing, and to take that, I mean, as a Royal Library and University Library into our kind of administration has been really difficult. So the APC management currently is still taking place in research groups, is still taking place by controllers at different faculties and departments. But I think from a national perspective on the big deals we make and the transformative deals we might make in the future, I think Chronosub could become an essential tool for getting those kind of APC management data as well. And then exactly the policy compliance management is something also support officers at different faculty and departments spend a lot of time helping researchers with, to actually report back to funders that they live up to the requirements, that they have published this and this, that it is open access, and all these requirements that comes. And it's actually something that reporting can also be made from Chronosub. And I think if we can bind the stakeholders together in using these data and pipeline them back and forth, we would be really, really far. But of course, that's some of the aims for the future. And then exactly also from an administrative perspective, build open access monitoring and data analytics so we can inform our future decisions. That's really, really, really crucial. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Michael. So if we then look at this opt-in model, what we are working towards, that means that, as Michael said, it's a decentralized university. So we do see that there are certain faculties that will opt in and use some of these services before others do. And that means that more and more of the different support mechanisms can be used to benefit authors across the university. So authors can log into a university branded environment on Chronosub already, where they can do their journal compliance checks with funders and the own institution. The integration here is in place to submit manuscript and metadata to publishers, not for all journals, but for many, many thousands. Getting data back from publishers directly, including the AEM, and I'll comment on that a little bit more in detail. And this is where we already have a number of checks set up, and this is something that we can also then adjust if a certain faculty would like to have, that they may have other criteria, for example. And we enable administrators to also do explicit approvals in the case that these kinds of checks are not completely sort of green or red, but in the gray zone, or yellow then maybe. So it's possible to give an explicit approval, rejection, or conditional approval. And for the articles that have an APC and that are approved, then the system makes use of these deposit accounts, and we pay the publishers directly. So we're unburdening the authors from that process of paying and then claiming money back from the institution in one way or the other. And we have prepared the ground for indeed them pushing all of this data, write the data directly into Pure. But this is now an ongoing process that we are intensely looking forward to. And more specifically then on that topic, I was also listening into the Open Science panel discussion here a little bit earlier today during the conference, which highlighted one of the very most common challenges that we have with CRIS systems, and that is to get the full text and the right full text version from the authors, and especially since this is an article that has been published already, so the authors have sort of in their minds already moved on to their next article. So what we have started to do is to collect AEMs from publishers' submission systems. So we get this from some of the submission systems already, like ScholarOne and others. And where we do not get it, we are doing a number of different lookups. It's unlikely that we get something from, for example, direct links through Unpaywall and the like at this early stage at acceptance. But we still believe that we can catch a little bit of the cake in that sense. But at this time, the authors do have an incentive to actually provide the AEM, because the article is not just published. So they need to do something to get their invoice paid, if this is an APC, for example, or just move ahead in the publishing workflow. So Chronosub can trigger automated notifications to authors, and secondly, they don't have to go into the system. They can just forward their AEM per email, and we're working on an automation of the ingest of those and scanning the AEM dynamically. So the authors really should have as low touch service as possible. They can just, as I said, forward their AEM or ask the corresponding author, if they are not that to forward it to a specific sort of university-specific email address that Chronosub sort of ingests from. And that means that we can then deposit the data in various places. We are working with Zenodo and Dryad, also for research data sets, for example. So that goes, of course, beyond the AEMs here, but then also writing the metadata and the full text into Pure. So Based on this collaboration and also a number of others with other institutions, we have a number of lessons learned how to navigate the complexities of open access. We don't have the solution to all, but very quickly we try to identify best practice. And an important part of that is that the institution has a well thought through open access strategy. And very often we see that institutions that are successful, they put the author experience first, really trying to unburden the researchers as much as possible. They also need to be very
Martin,
bold.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to interrupt. This has been fantastic, and we've extended our time past a little bit. I know that people can find you in the expo gallery. That Chronosub has a space there. Michael, I'm sure you're probably hanging out in the user group a little bit, but there's also the I think it's communicate. What's contact something. There's a little place where you can look at people and send messages directly. So if people have questions, I'd like them to please follow up with you there. Thank you again. Very fascinating. It is a complex problem, and kudos to y'all for tackling it and trying to make it work, especially for libraries who are in this whole new area of guidance that we never had to be into before. So thank you so much for that. We've actually reached the end of the whole session. So again, thank you. And everybody that's been listening in, thank you. We just have a little time in the agenda now to visit the expo gallery, as I mentioned. I know Chronosub has a virtual booth there. It's a great opportunity to meet with third-party vendors and participants in the conference. There are all of the user groups, I think, have a space in there, and one of the little pieces, if you haven't popped over to the expo gallery, I encourage you to do that. The support team, the Pure support team, has a space in the expo gallery as well, and they're standing by. I think they've had posted some open discussion session times as well, and I look forward to welcoming you back. We have a little less than 30 minutes now since we ran over a smidgen, but please take your time to go and refresh and visit those expo galleries, and we will see you back here at 10:40. Thank you.